Thank you, Trisha. Thanks, everyone, for joining me today. So my name is Brian Houck. I am an applied scientist at Microsoft, and the entirety of my job is looking for ways to make our internal engineers happier and more productive. And I do that by conducting a lot of formal research into all of the different factors that impact developer productivity. And historically, a lot of my work has focused on the human factors of productivity. I don't care necessarily how our employees become happier and more productive. I just care that they do. And so I'm looking at all the different knobs and levers that I can play with in order to ensure that's true. And so some examples of the kinds of things that I look at are, answering questions like, how do our office designs impact developer productivity? And I can look at how developers move into more modern offices or, more legacy buildings. And I can measure that developers in more modern office buildings, they are more collaborative. They are more engaged. They do more work. Why? Because access to sunlight and better HVAC systems matter. They serve a human need. Seattle, even though it is the northernmost major city in the continental United States, freaks out every time we get snow. I can actually look at our developer coding patterns over the winter, and I can tell you what days are snow days in Seattle because coding drops 18%. Now, there's lots of confounding reasons why that is true, but it is true. It is a human factor that I look at. I know that you as developers, you hate slow builds, you hate flaky tests, but I really know that you hate nothing so much as redundant, repetitive, low-quality meetings. And I can quantify that. I know that too many meetings is the number 2 most frequently cited workplace challenge amongst developers, not just at Microsoft, across the industry. And I know particularly the bureaucratic processes that often accompany meetings. If you feel like you have to deal with a lot of bureaucracy in your jobs, you are 70% more likely to be looking for jobs at other companies. Nothing crushes your spirit more than bureaucracy. Vacation time. I look at the relationship between taking time off and productivity. And I can see that taking more time off doesn't actually result in any less work getting done, but does provide meaningful protection against things like burnout. A study that I am running right now is looking at quantifying the relationship between sleep and developer productivity. And if you want to know the answer to that, come to whatever my next talk will be because we're still wrapping this study up. But as you can see, I look across a wide range of different factors to really understand how our human experience is impacting our developer productivity. And because of this work, as you might imagine, I get asked to talk to a lot of CTOs and engineering leaders across the industry. And I used to get asked this, wide range of interesting questions. I would get asked like, are Taco Tuesdays really worth it? Does that make good business sense? I would get asked things like, what's the ideal PM to dev ratio? How should I be structuring my organization? Certainly back in 2020 and 2021, I got asked a lot about, what should be our hybrid work policies? Does return to office actually work? Like, does that make people more productive? What does the data say? And I won't go into that in too much detail today because it is a contentious subject at the moment. But if you buy me a drink at happy hour, I will certainly tell you the answer. And so I got all of these questions. It was always great conversations. But now, every leader I talk to asks me the exact same question. How is AI impacting my developers' productivity? It is very top of mind for everyone. And unfortunately, oftentimes when I talk to engineering leaders, they already have an idea in their head, and they're really hoping that I can provide the data that will help support it. And the ideas that they have in their head span a really large spectrum. It is everything from AI is so amazing, so revolutionary. Can I cut 50% of my developer workforce and still get the same amount done? That's on one end. And on the other end is, I don't know that it's actually worth the cost. For the cost of a license of a coding assistant tool like GitHub Copilot, it has to improve developer productivity by less than 0.5% to justify its expense. So effectively, you're saying it is providing no value. And what leaders often forget is the people they should be asking on where the truth is are the people who are actually using these tools to do their jobs. And when I say AI tools, I am of course, talking about coding assistants, but any AI tools, Chat GPT or, the AI copilots built into Office. And so when I go and ask you, the developers actually using it, are you worried that it's going to take your job? You see it. Do you think it could replace what you do? No, you clearly do not. Only 10% of developers are concerned that AI even may automate away their jobs. You're using it. You know that you are not in danger of being replaced by AI, but are you getting any value out of it? Yes. When I go and ask you, 90% of you think that AI is making you more productive. And nearly 80% of you who have used AI tools, nearly 80% of you say that you would be disappointed if you could no longer use them to do your day-to-day tasks. Clearly it's helping, but it's not replacing. And so I really wanted to understand, to help answer this question that is so top of mind. Well, in what ways is it helping? How can we increase that impact? And how much? And so in order to get to the answer of this, I needed a framework on how to think about it. And as you heard in the incredible talk that just preceded mine, all frameworks, all models are wrong, but they're all helpful in different ways. And I had the great fortune back in 2021 to work on a framework for developer productivity called SPACE. I see one of my co-authors in the audience. And the central theme of SPACE is that developer productivity is not one thing. You will never be able to boil it down to a single metric. As much as engineering and business leaders want one metric you can put on a scorecard, it is a fool's errand. Our concept is productivity is many things. It spans many dimensions. And the dimensions that we proposed are, productivity is certainly satisfaction, well-being. Are your developers happy? Are they growing, learning? Are they thriving? And it's also outcomes. So performance in this case means outcomes, but didn't fit into our nice mnemonic here. And so we say performance. Did the thing that you built, did it satisfy the business and customer needs that you intended it to? When people think about developer productivity, they often first think about how much work you did, how much activity happened. And that is valuable to look at. It's just not the only thing you should look at, how much work happened. We should also be thinking about how collaboratively we are doing our work. Are we building off other people's work? Are other people able to build off ours? We are more than the sum of our parts. I'm going to have some evidence for this later on. And then is all of this done efficiently? And when I go and ask you, so this sprang from the minds of the authors. We said, okay, this is our view based on our own experience, our own research, what we think of as developer productivity across all of these lenses. But when Dr. Peggy Story and I went and actually asked you, how do you define productivity in your own words? You actually view productivity through these different nuanced dimensions. You talk about being happy, feeling fulfilled in your work. You talk about satisfying your business outcomes, your customer outcomes, how much work you do, how collaboratively you do it, and how efficiently it all happens. And so the question I have then is, how can I take these principles, this notion of productivity being many things, and apply it to the question of, is AI impacting developer productivity? Now, when I originally submitted a talk, I had envisioned coming and talking about, all right, well, how does Microsoft internally apply the SPACE principles? What are the metrics we use? Why do we use them? How do we think about them? How do we analyze them? But there are a lot of talks today that are covering that subject. And so I didn't feel that I needed to sort of just add my own voice onto it. The talk you just heard did a great job sort of framing the problem. Kareem's talk following mine, I cannot recommend to you enough that you should stay and listen to him. He is always a brilliant speaker. I said, okay, I'm going to try to apply this. My talk will be about applying the principles of SPACE to a singular problem. And in this case, the singular problem of, is AI impacting developer productivity is interesting because it really highlights so many of the pitfalls that we have when trying to measure the developer experience. And so the first thing that I did in order to understand how productivity might be impacted is I just asked you, like, how is, do you think that the use of AI tools is making you more productive across different dimensions? And what you told me is, 62% of you said using AI tools increases my job satisfaction. You're feeling more fulfilled. You're feeling more accomplished, able to do some of your tasks. And we'll talk about why in a second. 71% of you said that it is increasing your ability to deliver customer value. Not surprising, nearly 90% of you think that using AI tools is helping you increase your task throughput. That's what we hear a lot about. Slightly under half of you feel that it is improving your ability to effectively collaborate with your peers. And slightly more than 80% of you feel that it is increasing your ability to do your job efficiently. And so this is really interesting because we see that the impact of using AI tools, you were telling me that is not even across all dimensions, but it is spanning many dimensions. In fact, the majority of you are saying that it is improving almost every dimension. And this really brings me to the first couple of lessons that I want to sort of stop and mention. And the first one is, again, don't try to answer this question of, hey, is AI improving productivity by helping us complete coding tasks faster? You really need to look at it across lots of different angles and start by, these leaders who are asking me should have started not by asking me, but by asking their developers, the people actually using the tools, best. But even once leaders do talk to their developers, so many times I hear, sure, they told me they love it. They told me they're being more productive. And I believe them, sort of, but I really want some objective data to prove it to me. And this is where we can run into some pitfalls. I will say that the majority of my work is based on using objective quant data. I am looking at, again, as developers move into different office buildings, I am looking at their Visual Studio telemetry. I'm looking at their Outlook and their Teams telemetry. I am looking at their build frequency, their GitHub data. I do a lot of work looking at telemetry, but I always start with the subjective and qualitative work. And, there are some great studies out here that touch on this. Academically, rigorous, scientifically rigorous, done by world-renowned economists, studies that have shown that using AI coding assistants can decrease the amount of time it takes to complete tasks, coding tasks by up to 56%. This is real. This is real science in a laboratory setting. And the problem is, even objective truth, that is peer-reviewed research, that is objective truth, but it can still be a lie. And really what I mean by that is it can be misleading. Because that, you can see why an engineering leader will say, great, my devs can complete their work 50% faster. That's why I can lay off 50% of my devs. You could see where that sort of logical leap happens. And it really highlights two fundamental misunderstandings of how developers work. And the first is leaders often dramatically overestimate how much time per day you actually get to spend writing code. In fact, research has shown that on average, only about 15% of a developer's day is spent writing code. And even if I add in things like testing and debugging, that only grows to 25 to 30% of the day. You are spending a lot of your days in meetings, taking your compliance training, getting interrupted by other people. There's answering emails, writing documentation. Your day involves a lot of very different activities. And yes, you might be able to complete some coding tasks faster, but that's only a relatively small slice of your day. And it also has highlighted another, I think, misunderstanding of how you work, and that is how dramatically your tasks vary in complexity and difficulty. And so, there are certainly some tasks that using tools like GitHub Copilot will help you complete 50% faster or even more. But that's not all tasks. And so when I went and asked you, well, what are the kinds of tasks? What are the kinds of ways that AI is helping you? you were pretty unanimous in your responses. It is really, really good at helping small, repetitive, mundane tasks. These AI coding assistants in particular are great at, getting rid of some of those tedious tasks, helping you with boilerplate stuff, helping you with scripting things. It is very clear that you still very much need to be front and center in the driver's seat for all of the complex, hard, nuanced, novel problems. And so, there are some tasks that AI is better at helping on than others. And that is why it becomes difficult to just say, oh yeah, AI makes you 10% faster or 10% more productive. Because what does that actually mean? And even if in aggregate your tasks vary, all of your own unique personal individual circumstances are unique. And that influences things a lot as well. And so let's talk through some examples of this. So how much you use AI may impact the gains you see from it. And so one of the things I have done is, and this is everywhere where you see source, a not yet published survey, this is in progress research study that I'm doing. One of my co-authors is sitting around here somewhere. Shweta, you can raise your hand and say hi. If you have any questions, you can go and ask her. One of the things for the study that we've done is we went and asked, we asked you, how often are you using AI? If it's more than 0, how often? Is it, is it once a month? Is it, every day, somewhere in between? And then I asked you, how strongly do you believe that AI is making you more productive? And I could convert that agreement scale to a 5-point scale. And so a 5 on this scale is you strongly believe it's making you more productive, and a 1 is you strongly believe that it's making you less productive. It's I do not think this is helping. And I could take sort of that agreement rating, which is how strongly do you actually think it is making you more productive, and I could just chart that against how often you use AI. And it's as a researcher, this is almost too perfect, right? It's as you use AI more, it is increasing. Your confidence that it is helping is increasing. And what this really shows is, again, that developers who are using AI more feel more strongly that it positively impacts your experience. Now, I don't know, I cannot prove the direction of this relationship, but just logically, it stands to reason as you use the tools more, and these tools, while helpful, are not universally helpful. They're helpful on certain tasks. As you use them more, you learn the kinds of tasks they're helpful for and not, and thus you get more out of them. And so it's not just how your own patterns change things. The people around you influence it as well. And so as part of the study, I asked you all how many of your peers are regularly using AI in order to accomplish their tasks. Virtually nobody said no one on my team is using AI. So it's, some of your peers, most of your peers, all of your peers. And then I also asked you, do you think your team is productive? And I could then, again, chart those things. And so as an example, for those of you who said some of your peers are using AI to accomplish your tasks, 81% of you said that your team is productive. Again, as a researcher, this is almost too perfect. As more of your peers are using AI, you are much more likely to view your team as productive. Now, again, I cannot prove the direction of this relationship, but logic would sort of hold that you have been almost unanimous in your belief that AI is helping you to be more productive as developers. And thus, if you believe AI is making you more productive and more of your team is using it, then you have confidence that, yes, that team is going to be more productive. But what was really, really interesting to me is I then went and graphed your own view of how your own productivity is changing. And so that agreement scale I just talked about, I graphed that against how many people on your team are using AI. And that also increases. As more people around you are using AI, your confidence that your own gains from it go up. And again, this is I'm looking at static relationships. I can't prove causality here, but the logic, sort of my initial hypothesis when I look at this is, well, as more people around me are learning the ways in which these new AI tools are helping us do our jobs, then we can learn from each other, we can grow from each other, and it creates this like compounding flywheel effect. And the data certainly is starting to indicate that. And so your patterns change how impactful using AI tools are. The patterns of the people around you change how impactful you are, how much impact you're getting out of AI. And there are more things that teams can do to even further supercharge it. And so things like just providing documentation. Teams who provide documentation on best practices see about 3% higher confidence that AI is improving productivity. Simply evangelizing it. Teams who advocate for the use of AI, who are like, hey, this is cool new technology, you should try it. Teams who do that, nearly 10% higher confidence that AI is improving productivity. And so the culture of how these tools are deployed on your team are also having an uplifting effect. And this highlights my fourth lesson, that universal truths are really hard to find, because sort of the meme is the answer is always, it depends. And the problem is, it really is most of the time. Now, there are some cases, like I've mentioned now a few times, some of my work looking at how building designs impact developer productivity. That is pretty much a universal truth. Why? Because as humans, we all have a sort of biological response to sunlight and clean air. But in general, most of what I find is highly dependent on our own unique circumstances, our own work styles, the kinds of work we are doing. And thus, when I get asked to, my sales team would love it if I could say, yes, you can go and tell all our customers that AI makes you X% more productive. But it's so nuanced and it's so dependent that it's really hard to do that very globally. And so, great. I've given sort of like lots of ideas of, how to apply these principles, but I'm still going to be asked by every leader, okay, Brian, I believe you. That all makes sense. Devs are saying they love it, and they love it in different ways based on circumstances. But what are the metrics you are using? What are the metrics you are using? And I very much did not want this talk to be about, well, here are all the specific metrics. So I just want to mention it's the same ones that I use to measure everything else. Don't invent new metrics for every problem. Take the metrics that you have already identified within your organizations as being meaningful to developers and see whether or not AI as an intervention, just like any other intervention, is impacting them. And so I look at a lot of metrics internally. I am not going to go into detail on these. I'm looking at onboarding speeds. I'm looking at code review times. I'm looking at service health things. And these are the same metrics that I use to see how do snow days impact productivity to how is AI impacting productivity. They're just different interventions. And so the next sort of central tip that I want to give is stick to your metrics. Different problems, same principles. Don't reinvent the wheel every time. Otherwise, you're going to be choosing metrics to fit the problem, which is inherently going to introduce bias. And, yes, we may need to reevaluate our metrics over time because as what it means to be an engineer may be changing based on, emerging new trends and technologies. The definition of some of these metrics may change. In general, that is a different problem than, hey, how do I measure this one unique thing? You should have a framework. There are no right frameworks. There are some wrong frameworks, but it's like have a framework and stick to it. If that framework is speed, ease, quality, great. If it's, DX, great. If it's space, great. But have a framework and stick to it. And so, okay, as we sort of put all of this together, what does this look like? So again, I talked about, look across lots of dimensions, ask the people actually using the tools about their experience, look at how different factors can influence things, stick to your metrics. And using these principles, just in summary, what is it that I think I know? Well, I have a lot of confidence that regularly using AI to complete your tasks makes you more productive. Why do I have so much confidence? Because 90% of you told me so. Like, it's hard to get 90% of people to agree to anything, but you agree to this. And not only do I have high confidence that regularly using AI makes you more productive, I have high confidence that regularly using AI makes you productive across a wide range of dimensions. Again, because the overwhelming majority of you told me so. I also believe that the more people on your team that are using AI, the more productive your team appears to be. But also the more people on your team using AI, the more productive, the more impactful that AI appears to be for you. The more often you use it, the better you seem to get at it. And there are things that teams can do around offering formal training, documentation, and just like support, the evangelism to use this that seems to have a positive outcome for your team. And as I looked at this, when I first started looking at the problem of AI, I will be honest, I did it because it is what everybody was asking me about. And quite frankly, it is what my leadership internally really wants me to talk about. And at first, I wasn't that excited about it because historically, I haven't looked at the impact of specific tools. As I had mentioned before, my work has largely focused on human problems. I look at how human psychology and physiology are impacting productivity. But as I looked at this more, I was reminded that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how advanced a tool is, they are all human problems. It is all about how we as humans are using it, the culture around us that is, empowering us to use these tools, how our leadership is talking about it and enabling us. If you work in an organization where you can tell your leadership has a view that they can lay off 50% of their devs, well, that is going to change the way that you use AI. And it also is going to show that those leaders have no idea how you actually do any work. And so, for my last slide, I want to say that this study is still something that is in progress. I actually have not talked about sort of the central theme of the study yet because we're still collecting data. I say a 10-minute survey. It is really a 7-minute survey. People would be willing to take a survey in like the small gaps between meetings. If I could get another 100 responses, I would be over the moon. It would be great. You can take it whenever you want. There are no required open text questions, so you can just zip through it. Like I said, it's 7 minutes. Contribute to science, because you might, if you listen to that and you're like, that doesn't match my experiences. Like, what are you talking about, Brian? Or you're like, yes, +1. If you're either end of that spectrum, I want to hear from you. And so please take that survey. So with that, I do think I am supposed to give everyone a break. The next talk is roughly at 11 o'clock. Kareem's talk in this room is going to be phenomenal. So I highly encourage people to stay. And by all means, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or the conference app. And thanks all so very, very much.